Going to be discussing a book that just came out. It's the latest Anne Tyler book called French Braid. It is her 24th novel. She is, I think, 80 years old. I do not come to this book with any history of being an Anne Tyler fan, despite the fact that she's so well known and I've seen her books, throughout the years. I never really got into them, never really got them. So if that's the case with you, I very highly recommend to start with the latest. So the hook of this book is that the protagonist, called Mercy, is an older woman who decides to very subtly leave her husband and the family home once her third child moves out. So she has two daughters and a son. They grow up, they move out, and she slowly, without even talking to anyone, including her husband, she has a small art studio that she's been using through the years for a place to, work on her art. And slowly but surely, every time she goes there, she takes another bag of her belongings, and eventually she ends up, sleeping the night there. And this continues. So this is a great hook for the book, and I think it's a fair hook. But there's so much more going on. This is not the story of an unhappy woman who decides to leave her husband. Not at all. This is a wonderful character study of several members of a family, and in a way it's a character study of a family, and it's done in a particularly unique way that has fascinated me. I did a little bit of research just to see what other what reviewers are saying, and my favorite review is in the Evening Standard. I very much if you want to read something about this book, I really recommend that article. The Evening Standard reviewer called it a quietly radical story, and they also mentioned that they've been Anne Tylered, which I think is a really clever way of putting it. What my experience with the book was that I almost stopped reading it and decided it wasn't for me. And I think it would help you if you came to the book with certain understandings. You need to understand that you're going to find yourself waiting for something to happen. It will sort of happen, but by the time it happens, you won't be really paying much attention to it. And you'll really be interested in other things. The other things are the minutiae, the small details that Anne Tyler supplies her reader. And once again, when you start the book, you probably, as I was truly confused as to what she was doing, because she'd give a lot of minute descriptions about what people were wearing, and also every action that occurred. You'd often have it described in great detail, so it wouldn't be they just got on the train. It would be a description of the seating arrangement, the bags they were holding, a certain look they got from another person. And all this time you're thinking, oh, these details are being given because they're going to be important to the plot. That's not necessarily the case. And once I realized that, I understood what is happening in this book, and it's so wonderful once you understand that. And I'm looking forward to rereading it because of that. And another way Anne Tyler entices you to accept the details that she gives, for just because she's giving the details, is because she also has Mercy, her protagonist, the artist, making paintings that I felt reflected much of what Anne Tyler herself does. So Mercy is obsessed with painting portraits of houses, and so you can hire her to come to your home, and she look around, and what she does is she paints the scene, and there's always going to be, it's like her signature art. There's always going to be one tiny object within that scene that will be rendered in precise, clear detail. The rest might might look it might be quite blurry, or it might have sort of any effect you might give it other than pure realistic detail. And I can't stop thinking about that, and how much I wish that I could see Mercy's art. And in a way I am seeing Mercy's art. It's just through the text, the art of Anne Tyler, because that's exactly what she does. She'll give you a beautiful rendition of the family as a whole, and she'll concentrate on tiny little details. And it's those tiny little details that don't necessarily have great symbolic impact. They might. What I found was that that by doing that, Tyler and Mercy are showing us, the viewer, the reader, the audience, that not everything we see is true and real and exact, and it really can never be, unless it's an object. And I really find that to be the key to the book. And I wish they had, I really, really wish they had used that aspect of the story for the cover. I find the covers of Anne Tyler's books abhorrent. I cannot stand the photographs they seem to use. I believe I would have come to Anne Tyler much, much earlier if her covers looked differently. Were different, excuse me. And that brings me to something I was thinking about concerning Anne Patchett, whose book of essays I just read recently came out, and in it she actually has a chapter which discusses her book covers through the years, and how she only in the last couple of years was she able to really put her foot down and really request certain covers that the publishers were not at the beginning interested at all, in her opinion. And it's interesting that I only came to Anne Patchett with The Dutch House. That was the first book of hers that I read, and that was simply because the cover is so sublime. And she tells the story about how she had asked an artist, I don't remember if it was a friend or someone she admired, to actually paint a portrait of this particular young girl that she had in mind within the story. And sure enough, if you look at the cover of The Dutch House, you'll see that. And it's been heralded as one of the most beautiful, I mean, it's an immensely meaningful and appropriate cover. And again, she has a painting of a little white fluffy dog on the cover of her latest book of essays. And that also really worked for me. So to come back though to the essence of Anne Tyler's French Braid, I think it might be of interest to you before you read to realize that there are going to be 8 chapters, and I actually love that because she herself, Anne Tyler, is 80 years old. And it each chapter more or less progresses in 10 years. So you jump ahead 10 years to see where the family is at and what's happening with the characters. On the fifth, interestingly, also, again, I love this sort of, I'm a total geek for this. Chapter 5 describes the Mercy and her husband Robin's 50th wedding anniversary. Again, a lovely touch. Chapter 6 is my favorite, and this is not a spoiler in any way, but I would keep my eye out for how Anne Tyler so beautifully expresses the connection between a grandmother and a granddaughter in chapter 6. It blew me away. And my favorite quote comes from the granddaughter, Kendall, who is desperately trying for the family to stop her calling. They call her Candle because that's how she pronounced her name when she was a child. And she desperately wants to be called Kendall again. And Kendall says to her grandmother, when I grow up, I'm going to follow your schedule exactly. And there's so much to be said for that small sentence. The work that is shown within this book, the work we do within families, the emotional work, the work on relationships, the commercial work, and the world of work as we know it as a career does not belong in this book at all, and I found that extraordinarily refreshing. And of course, there's also the work of the artist that is a theme that runs through it, and which I found to be so refreshing, so inspiring, and really, really gave me sort of a second lease on the way I look at my own second half of life, being 53 myself. So I highly recommend it. There's also another. I want to describe another scene which was my favorite. So when you come to it, think of me. One of the characters is looking back at his children. They're now adults, and he's remembering them as they were children, and he sees them as completely different people. So he feels that he misses them as children. It's not that he doesn't like his adult children, but he misses those other children. And I just thought, again, it's done so subtly and with such flair. I am a huge Anne Tyler fan now. Now, to go to my second book, and I'm not going to spend as much time on the second book as the first, I don't think. I mean, you never know because I'm going on and on. But the second book is translated from the Japanese. It came out, I believe, in 2020. It's called There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job. And it's written by Kikuko Tsumura. As you can see from my smile, I absolutely loved this book. Again, I would love to reread it. In fact, I got it from the library and I'm planning to buy it. I need it on my shelf. Its hook is, on the surface, utterly different from French Braid. This is the story of an unnamed protagonist, a woman who I think she's 36. The author herself is 43, just to give you an idea. So the protagonist is 36, and she has been working, we don't know where, but she's been working for 14 years and has burnt out. She's completely burnt out. She lives in Japan, and she's single. We don't know anything more about her than that she's moved in with her parents because she had to quit. And realizing that she still needs to work, she goes to an employment agency and she meets this lovely woman who helps her throughout the book find short contract work. And so here you have I think there's 5 chapters, and each chapter describes a different type of work that she does. There is a sense almost from the beginning that it's not going to be pure realism. There's something of the fantastic in this book, but it crept up on me, frankly, so in such a quiet way that when I went and compared my opinion to other reviews, I was literally taken aback, like gobsmacked, to read how they described another reviewer described the book as magical realism. And of course it sort of is, but it's I suspended my disbelief to such an extent that I actually saw it as a real world, and somehow, which is saying a lot for the work of Tsumura. I would say that reading about each job that the unnamed protagonist does is lots of fun. There's a lot of humor. There's a lot of unexpected things that happen, and just for that, it's worth a read. I saw something in it that I haven't seen other reviewers mention, and I think it's worth telling you, because if you're the kind of person who enjoys reading books that explore art, and especially explore writers and how writers work, I do recommend this for that, because I read each of the protagonist's jobs as being metaphors for how she's exploring the possibility of herself becoming an artist or a writer. Now, there's no absolute proof of this, but I'll give you examples which are not spoilers. For example, the first job she does is a surveillance job. She has to watch the TV screens it sounds like she's working for the police or some sort of security, and the screens show a writer in his home, and she's waiting for something to happen, for him to receive a package. And once he receives the package, she alerts the authorities. But while she's waiting, she's looking at, this is how a writer works. And it's very funny, because you see him staring at the screen for hours. You see him procrastinating in many different amusing ways. But there is something to be said for her thinking, well, what does it mean to be a writer? And then as the book progresses, she gets a job writing copy for a company that makes and packages rice crisps and rice crackers, and so you see her working with text in a marketing arena, and eventually in the last chapter, and again, it's not a spoiler, because you can tell just from reading the chapter headings that this is going to be the case. In the end, she gets a job to sit in a hut by herself in the middle of a national park. And I mean, I'm smiling just remembering it. It's just fantastic. As for the cover, um, in this case, I don't mind the cover, but I think it's the kind of cover that we are seeing. It seemed to me that I had seen many such covers of a woman hiding her face or bending towards a wall or a table. A woman who has had enough, who's at the end of her rope. And so I Googled it out of interest, and I did find, I think it was a Guardian article that does describe exactly that. So it's not my imagination. They've been doing that a lot lately. It's a trend. So as you can see, without me absolutely joining the dots, you've with French braid on the one hand, and there's no such thing as an easy job on the other. You have you are given the ability that these two authors give you the tools you need to turn away from the constant pressure you might be experiencing, that you have to have a particular career, that you have to be making a certain kind of money, that plot comes before character. And I think that both of these books are very comforting, without being at all saccharine. In fact, they are comforting because they embrace the truth of work and the truth of art and the truth of relationships. And when you blow something open and shine light on it, that's when I feel comfort. So that might not work for everyone, but I hope it might work for you when you read these books. And as you can tell, I'm very excited to have discovered them. For my next video, I really hope, if I get my act together, to talk about a book of poetry. It is Poetry Month, which doesn't mean very much, but it did kind of work as a kick up the ass for me to really make an effort to go back to my roots, which is poetry, and see what's happening in the poetry scene right now. So I wish you all the very best. I'm very happy that the light is better this time than it was last time. And hopefully my videos will get better as I go along. Okay, all the best to you, and I'll see you next time.